Genius is not a mysterious gift reserved for a rare few. It is a way of thinking, a disciplined approach to observing the world, asking better questions, and refusing to accept shallow answers. The human brain is far more powerful than most people ever realize, yet it often remains undertrained, distracted, and guided by habits that limit its true potential. When you learn how to direct your thinking with intention, your mind begins to operate differently, ideas become clearer, problems become solvable, opportunities appear where others see confusion. Throughout history, individuals we admire as geniuses did something simple but powerful. They trained their minds. They trained themselves to think deeper, to remain curious, to challenge assumptions, and to focus intensely on understanding how things work. Their intelligence was not simply a matter of birth. It was strengthened through practice, discipline, and a relentless desire to improve the way they thought. Your brain works in a similar way to a muscle. Leave it unused, and it weakens. Train it properly, and it grows stronger, sharper, and more capable with time. The remarkable truth is that the mind adapts to the way you use it. When you begin to train it deliberately, new patterns of thinking emerge. Creativity expands, memory improves, insight develops. Gradually, your mind starts to operate at a level you once thought was out of reach. In this audiobook, we will explore how to train your brain to think more clearly, focus more deeply, question more intelligently, and approach challenges with the calm confidence of a disciplined thinker. You will learn practical principles that strengthen your mental habits, sharpen your judgment, and unlock a higher level of thinking. The goal is not simply to know more, the goal is to think better. Because when your thinking improves, everything in your life begins to change. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Stop thinking like the crowd. Every great thinker begins the same way, by stepping away from the crowd. The crowd is comfortable, the crowd feels safe. When many people believe something, it creates the illusion that it must be true. But history tells a different story. Again and again, progress has come from individuals who were willing to question what everyone else accepted without thinking. Crowd thinking is powerful because it requires very little effort. When people around you hold the same opinion, repeat the same ideas, and follow the same habits, it becomes easy to do the same. Your brain saves energy by copying the environment. It adopts the assumptions it hears most often. Slowly, without realizing it, your thinking begins to mirror the thinking of everyone around you. And that is exactly why extraordinary thinking becomes rare. The truth is simple. The crowd usually follows what is familiar, not what is correct. It chooses comfort over curiosity. It repeats opinions instead of examining them. The average person hears an idea and asks, "Do other people believe this?" But a trained mind asks a different question, "Is this actually true?" That small shift changes everything. Consider the story of the Wright brothers. At a time when respected experts believed human flight was impossible, the idea of flying machines sounded ridiculous. Many scientists insisted that heavier-than-air machines would never leave the ground. Newspapers mocked the attempts. Experts dismissed the dream. But the Wright brothers did something the crowd refused to do. They questioned the assumption. Instead of asking what everyone believed, they asked what was physically possible. They studied birds. They tested small gliders. They experimented patiently, failure after failure. The crowd laughed. The brothers kept thinking. Eventually their airplane lifted into the sky and changed the world. This pattern appears everywhere in history. The greatest thinkers rarely accept ideas simply because they are popular. They test them. They examine them. They ask deeper questions. They train themselves to observe reality instead of blindly following opinion. Now, this does not mean rejecting everything the crowd believes. That would be foolish. Sometimes the crowd is right. But the difference is this: a trained thinker does not accept ideas automatically. They examine them carefully before agreeing. That habit, independent thinking, is the first step toward a genius mindset. Look around in daily life, and you will see crowd thinking everywhere. People choose careers because others expect it. They follow financial habits because their friends do the same. They believe certain goals are impossible simply because nobody around them has achieved them. But the mind of a genius operates differently. Instead of asking, "What is everyone doing?" they ask, "What actually works?" Instead of asking, "What do people believe?" they ask, "What evidence supports it?" Instead of accepting limitations, they investigate them. This does not require extraordinary intelligence. It requires courage. The courage to pause before accepting common opinions. The courage to think independently. And sometimes the courage to be misunderstood. Independent thinking often feels uncomfortable at first. Your brain is wired to seek agreement with others because agreement feels safe. Disagreement creates tension, but growth lives inside that tension. When you train your brain to question assumptions, you begin to notice something remarkable. Many ideas people repeat confidently have never been examined carefully. They are simply repeated habits of thought. A trained thinker refuses to inherit mental habits without inspection. Imagine two people hearing the same statement: "Success is mostly luck." One person accepts it immediately. After all, many people say the same thing. But the trained thinker pauses. They begin asking questions. What does the evidence show? Do successful people rely purely on luck? Or do they develop skills, discipline, and strategic thinking over time? Suddenly the statement no longer looks so simple. This is how your mind begins to sharpen, not by collecting more opinions, but by learning to examine them. Here is an important principle to remember. Your thinking environment shapes your thinking patterns. If you constantly surround yourself with negative, shallow, or lazy thinking, your brain gradually adopts those patterns. But if you expose your mind to deeper ideas, books, thoughtful discussions, challenging questions, your thinking expands. That is why great thinkers are careful about what they feed their minds. They read widely, they study different perspectives, they listen carefully, but they also evaluate what they hear. They refuse to let the crowd decide how they think. And you can develop this same ability. Start with a simple habit. Whenever you hear a widely accepted idea, pause and ask yourself a few questions. Why do people believe this? What evidence supports it? Is there another way to view this situation? You are not trying to argue with everyone. You are simply training your brain to think independently. Because genius does not begin with intelligence, it begins with courage. The courage to step away from the noise of the crowd, to observe the world carefully, and to think for yourself. Once you develop that habit, something powerful happens. Your mind becomes sharper, more curious, more alert. Ideas begin to connect in ways they never did before. Problems that once seemed confusing start to reveal their structure, and slowly, almost quietly, you begin to think differently than the crowd. That is where genius begins. Chapter 2. Train your brain to ask better questions. The quality of your life is closely connected to the quality of the questions you ask. Every decision you make, every idea you develop, and every problem you solve begins with a question inside your mind. If your questions are shallow, your thinking will remain shallow. But when your questions become deeper, more precise, and more curious, your thinking begins to expand in remarkable ways. Great thinkers understand something that many people overlook. The brain is designed to search for answers. When you ask your mind a question, it immediately begins working on it, often quietly in the background. Your brain scans your memory, your experiences, and your knowledge to produce possible answers. But the direction of that search depends entirely on the question you ask. If someone constantly asks themselves negative questions like, "Why do things never work for me?" the brain starts searching for evidence to support that belief. It finds past failures, disappointments, and frustrations. Soon the person becomes convinced that life is unfair. The brain has simply followed the instructions it was given. But change the question, and the mind changes its direction. Instead of asking, "Why does this always go wrong?" imagine asking, "What can I learn from this situation?" Suddenly, the brain begins searching for lessons instead of excuses. The problem that once felt like a defeat becomes a source of insight. This simple shift in questioning is one of the most powerful mental tools you can develop. Consider the mindset of scientists and inventors. They rarely begin with answers. they begin with questions. Curiosity pushes them forward. They observe something unusual and ask, "Why does this happen?" That question leads to another question, and then another. Step by step, their curiosity opens the door to discovery. Albert Einstein once suggested that curiosity mattered more than raw intelligence. What drove his thinking was not a desire to show how smart he was, but a relentless desire to understand how the universe worked. As a young student, he asked simple but profound questions. What would it be like to ride alongside a beam of light? How does gravity affect time and space? These questions eventually led him toward revolutionary insights. But the habit of powerful questioning is not limited to scientists. It is a skill anyone can train. Many people move through life reacting to circumstances instead of questioning them. When a challenge appears, they ask only one question: how do I get through this? That question may help them survive the moment, but it rarely leads to deeper understanding. A trained thinker asks more useful questions. They might ask, what caused this problem? What are the hidden factors I haven't considered? Or what opportunity might exist inside this challenge? These questions stretch the mind. They force the brain to explore possibilities it might otherwise ignore. Imagine a business owner whose company suddenly faces declining sales. An untrained mind might ask, why are customers disappearing? While this question is understandable, it can easily lead to frustration or blame. The owner might start pointing fingers at the economy, competitors, or bad luck. But a stronger question changes the entire situation. Instead of focusing on blame, the owner might ask, what do customers truly need right now? Or what improvement could make our service impossible to ignore? These questions guide the brain toward creativity and solutions. Notice the difference. One type of question keeps the mind trapped in the problem. The other opens the door to possibility. Your brain becomes sharper every time you practice this skill. There is also another advantage to powerful questions. They protect you from assumptions. The human mind often jumps to conclusions based on incomplete information. We hear a statement and immediately believe it, or we see an outcome and assume we understand its cause. But a questioning mind refuses to settle for easy answers. When someone presents an idea, a trained thinker quietly asks, what evidence supports this? When they hear a popular opinion, they ask, is this based on facts or simply repetition? When they face a personal challenge, they ask, what part of this situation is within my control? Each question acts like a flashlight, illuminating hidden details. Over time, this habit changes the way your brain operates. You become less reactive and more analytical. You stop accepting ideas automatically and start exploring them thoughtfully. One useful practice is to carry a simple question throughout your day. What am I missing? This question encourages humility and curiosity. It reminds you that every situation may contain information you have not yet noticed. Another powerful question is, what is the real problem here? Often the difficulty we see is only a symptom of something deeper. By asking this question, you train your brain to dig beneath the surface instead of reacting to appearances. You can also strengthen your creativity by asking what-if questions. What if this process worked differently? What if there was a simpler solution? What if the opposite approach actually worked better? These questions invite your brain to explore new possibilities. Asking better questions does not mean questioning everything endlessly. The goal is not confusion. The goal is clarity. Questions are tools that guide the mind toward deeper understanding. With practice, something fascinating begins to happen. Your brain becomes more curious. It becomes more attentive. Instead of accepting the world as it appears, you begin examining how things truly work. Ideas connect more easily. Solutions appear more quickly. Your thinking becomes more flexible and creative. In time, you will notice that the smartest people in any field share this habit. They are not always the fastest thinkers, but they are the most curious. They ask thoughtful questions, listen carefully to the answers, and continue exploring until they reach deeper insight. Your brain is capable of the same process. Train it to ask better questions, and it will reward you with better thinking, better ideas, and better decisions. Chapter 3. Learn to think deep, not fast. Speed is admired in the modern world. Quick responses, instant opinions, rapid decisions, these are often celebrated as signs of intelligence. Social media rewards the fastest comment. Meetings reward the quickest answer. Many people believe that the faster they think, the smarter they appear. But true genius rarely operates at high speed. Great thinkers are not always the fastest thinkers. They are the deepest thinkers. Instead of rushing toward the first answer that appears, they slow down and examine the problem from several angles. They ask themselves whether the obvious answer is truly correct or simply the most convenient. The human brain has two ways of thinking. One is fast and automatic. It relies on habits, emotions, and familiar patterns. This type of thinking helps you react quickly in everyday situations. It allows you to recognize faces, respond to simple questions, or make routine decisions without much effort. But the second type of thinking is slower and more deliberate. It requires concentration. It analyzes information carefully. It questions assumptions and explores alternatives. This slower thinking is where deep insight lives. Unfortunately, many people rarely use it. Imagine a student solving a math problem. If they rush, they might quickly guess an answer based on the first pattern they see. Sometimes they might be correct, but often they miss an important detail. The faster they move, the more likely they are to overlook something important. But if they slow down, examine the numbers carefully, and think through each step, the solution becomes clearer. The extra time allows the brain to organize information properly. Deep thinking works the same way in every area of life. Consider a business leader deciding whether to launch a new product. A fast thinker might react emotionally. They might say yes because the idea sounds exciting, or no because it feels risky. But a deep thinker pauses. They examine the market, the timing, the resources required, and the possible outcomes. They ask questions that others might overlook. That pause often makes the difference between a brilliant decision and a costly mistake. History offers many examples of this principle. One of the habits that made Warren Buffett such a successful investor is his patience in thinking. He does not rush into decisions simply because opportunities appear exciting. Instead, he spends long periods studying companies, reading reports, and thinking carefully about long-term consequences. Sometimes he waits months or even years before making a decision. To some people, that might look slow, but that slowness protects him from costly errors. Deep thinking also strengthens creativity. When the brain has time to explore a problem, it begins connecting ideas that might not appear immediately. The first answer is rarely the most original one. The second or third idea may still follow familiar patterns. But if you continue thinking patiently, your mind eventually begins exploring new territory. That is why many breakthroughs occur after long periods of reflection. Writers experience this often. An author may struggle with a difficult paragraph or idea. At first, nothing seems to work. But after stepping away and allowing the mind time to think, the right words suddenly appear. The brain has quietly continued working on the problem. Your mind does its best work when it is given space to think deeply. This requires something that is becoming rare in modern life: uninterrupted attention. Constant notifications, messages, and distractions train the brain to jump rapidly from one thought to another. Instead of focusing deeply, the mind begins skimming the surface of everything, and shallow thinking produces shallow results. Training your brain to think deeply means creating moments of quiet concentration. It means allowing yourself time to reflect before responding. When faced with an important problem, resist the urge to answer immediately. Pause. Consider multiple perspectives. Ask yourself what information might be missing. Sometimes the best answer only appears after careful reflection. Another useful habit is writing your thoughts down. When ideas remain inside the mind, they often feel vague and scattered. But when you write them on paper, your brain begins organizing them more clearly. Writing slows your thinking just enough to reveal patterns, contradictions, and insights that might otherwise remain hidden. Deep thinking also benefits from curiosity. When you encounter an interesting idea, do not stop at the surface. Ask yourself why it works. Ask how it connects to other ideas you already understand. Ask what might happen if the situation was slightly different. These questions extend the depth of your thinking. At first, this process may feel unfamiliar. Your brain has likely been trained by a fast-moving environment. Slowing down may feel uncomfortable, but with practice, you will notice something important. Your thinking becomes clearer, your decisions become wiser, your ideas become more original. You begin seeing details that others miss. The goal is not to become slow in every situation. Some moments require quick reactions, but when dealing with important decisions, complex problems, or creative challenges, depth always beats speed. Genius is not measured by how quickly someone answers a question, it is measured by how deeply they understand it. Train your brain to slow down when it matters. Give your mind the time it needs to explore, question, and analyze. When you do, your thinking gains a level of clarity and power that rushed thinking can never reach. Chapter 4. Feed your mind the right information. Your brain becomes what you feed it. Just as the body reflects the quality of the food you eat, the mind reflects the quality of the information you consume. Every article you read, every conversation you engage in, every video you watch, and every idea you repeat gradually shapes the structure of your thinking. Over time, these inputs become the raw material from which your mind builds its understanding of the world. Many people overlook this simple truth. They believe intelligence is something fixed, something determined by genetics or education alone, but the brain is constantly adapting. It absorbs patterns from the information it receives. If that information is shallow, repetitive, or negative, the mind begins to reflect those qualities. If the information is rich, thoughtful, and challenging, the brain becomes sharper and more capable. Think of your mind as a garden. Whatever you plant and nurture will grow. If the garden is neglected, weeds appear naturally. In the same way, if your mind is constantly exposed to noise, distraction, and low-quality ideas, those influences slowly take root in your thinking. This is why great thinkers are careful about what they allow into their mental environment. Consider the habits of many successful innovators, leaders, and creators. They spend a significant portion of their time reading books, studying ideas, and learning from different fields of knowledge. They understand that every new concept expands their mental framework. Each insight becomes another tool for solving problems or recognizing opportunities. One famous example is Bill Gates. Despite leading one of the largest technology companies in the world, he developed a personal habit known as Think Week. During this time, he would step away from daily distractions and spend days reading research papers, books, and proposals. His goal was not simply to gather information, but to expose his mind to ideas that could influence the future of technology. This habit helped him remain ahead of many competitors. The lesson is simple: the mind grows stronger when it is regularly challenged by meaningful ideas. Unfortunately, modern life makes this difficult. Information today arrives faster than ever before. News headlines compete for attention. Social media delivers endless streams of short, fragmented thoughts. Much of this content is designed not to educate the mind, but to capture attention for a few seconds. The result is mental clutter. When the brain is constantly absorbing shallow or scattered information, it becomes harder to concentrate on deeper ideas. The mind becomes reactive instead of reflective. Instead of analyzing ideas carefully, it jumps quickly from one topic to another. Training your brain to think like a genius requires a different approach. You must become intentional about what enters your mind. Start by asking a simple question: does this information expand my thinking or merely fill my time? The difference may seem small, but it has enormous consequences. Information that expands your thinking, introduces new perspectives, challenges your assumptions, and stimulates curiosity. Information that merely fills time often leaves your mind unchanged. Books remain one of the most powerful tools for feeding the brain with meaningful knowledge. A well-written book represents years of thinking condensed into a few hundred pages. By reading regularly, you gain access to the experience and insight of people who have spent decades studying a particular subject. Over time, these ideas begin to connect. Knowledge from one field influences understanding in another. A concept learned in psychology might help you understand business. A principle from history might reveal patterns in modern events. This process builds intellectual depth. Another powerful source of mental nourishment is thoughtful conversation. When you engage with people who challenge your thinking, your mind is forced to examine ideas more carefully. Disagreement, when approached respectfully, can sharpen your reasoning and reveal perspectives you had not considered. The key is to seek conversations that explore ideas rather than simply repeat opinions. You should also be aware of the emotional tone of the information you consume. Constant exposure to negativity can gradually influence your mindset. If your environment is filled with pessimism, fear, or complaint, those patterns begin shaping your thinking. Your brain starts expecting problems instead of possibilities. This does not mean ignoring reality. Challenges and difficulties exist in every era, but a trained mind balances awareness of problems with exposure to solutions, progress, and constructive ideas. The goal is mental nutrition, not mental junk food. Just as the body becomes healthier with balanced meals, the mind becomes stronger when it receives diverse and meaningful input. Reading widely, studying different subjects, and exploring new ideas expand the brain's ability to recognize patterns and connections. This expansion is essential for genius-level thinking. Because genius rarely comes from knowing a single subject deeply, it often emerges when ideas from different fields collide. When someone understands science, philosophy, psychology, and history together, they begin seeing relationships others miss. Their thinking becomes multidimensional. You can begin building this advantage today by carefully choosing what you allow into your mind. Replace a portion of passive consumption with intentional learning. Instead of allowing random information to dominate your attention, actively seek ideas that stretch your understanding. Little by little, your mental environment will change, and as the quality of the information improves, the quality of your thinking will rise with it. Chapter 5. Master the Art of Focus. A powerful mind is not simply a mind full of ideas. It is a mind capable of holding its attention on one idea long enough for it to develop. Focus is the quiet force behind every great achievement. Without it, intelligence scatters in every direction. With it, even an ordinary mind can produce extraordinary results. The ability to concentrate deeply on a single task is one of the most valuable mental skills you can train, yet it is becoming increasingly rare. Modern life pulls the mind in dozens of directions at once. Messages appear, notifications flash, new information arrives every minute. Each interruption may seem small, but together they fragment attention. The brain becomes accustomed to jumping rapidly from one thought to another. Over time, this habit weakens the ability to think deeply. Imagine trying to read an important book while someone taps your shoulder every 30 seconds. Even if the interruptions are brief, your mind never settles into the rhythm of concentration. Each time your attention is pulled away, your brain must restart the process of understanding. This is exactly what happens when distractions dominate your environment. Great thinkers throughout history understood the importance of focused attention. They often created environments that protected their concentration. When Isaac Newton worked on mathematical problems, he would become so absorbed in his thinking that hours passed without his noticing. His mind was completely engaged with the problem before him. This level of focus allowed him to explore ideas in extraordinary depth. But focus is not something reserved for famous scientists or inventors. It is a skill that anyone can develop with deliberate practice. Like a muscle, attention becomes stronger the more you train it. The first step is recognizing how easily the mind drifts. Our thoughts naturally wander toward anything that appears interesting or urgent. The brain seeks novelty because novelty feels stimulating, but constant novelty prevents the mind from settling into deep concentration. To strengthen focus, you must begin by protecting periods of uninterrupted attention. Choose a task that requires clear thinking. It could be studying, writing, solving a problem, or learning a new skill. Then remove as many distractions as possible. Silence notifications, close unnecessary tabs. Create a quiet space where your mind can remain engaged with one activity. At first, you may notice how restless the mind feels. Thoughts may wander. You may feel an urge to check messages or switch tasks. This is normal. The brain has been trained by constant stimulation, and it takes time to rebuild the habit of sustained attention. Stay with the task anyway. Even 15 or 20 minutes of uninterrupted focus can begin strengthening your concentration. As this practice continues, your mind gradually becomes more comfortable with deeper levels of engagement. Tasks that once felt difficult begin to feel natural. Another powerful technique for improving focus is setting clear intentions before beginning a task. When your brain knows exactly what it is trying to accomplish, it can direct its attention more effectively. Instead of vaguely deciding to work for a while, choose a specific objective. For example, you might decide to write 2 pages, study 1 chapter, or solve a particular problem. Clarity strengthens concentration. You can also train your mind by practicing single tasking. Many people believe they are efficient when they handle several tasks at once. In reality, the brain does not truly perform tasks simultaneously. It switches rapidly between them. Each switch consumes mental energy and reduces the quality of attention. Single tasking eliminates this problem. When you give your full attention to one task, your brain operates more efficiently. Ideas connect more easily. Mistakes decrease. Time is used more effectively because your mind is not constantly restarting its thinking process. The benefits of focus extend far beyond productivity. Concentration also enhances creativity. When your mind remains engaged with a question for an extended period, deeper insights begin to emerge. The brain explores connections that would remain hidden during shallow thinking. This is why many creative breakthroughs occur during long periods of uninterrupted work. Focus also builds mental confidence. Each time you complete a challenging task through sustained concentration, your brain learns that it is capable of deeper effort. This confidence encourages you to tackle increasingly complex challenges. Over time, a powerful cycle develops. Greater focus leads to better results. Better results reinforce the value of concentration. The mind begins to prefer depth over distraction. Of course, no one maintains perfect focus every moment of the day. The brain needs rest as well as effort. Periods of relaxation allow ideas to settle and new insights to form. But the key difference lies in intention. A trained mind chooses when to focus and when to rest. It is not constantly pulled away by every passing distraction. In a world filled with noise, the ability to concentrate has become a rare advantage. Those who master focus gain access to deeper understanding, stronger creativity, and more meaningful productivity. Their minds operate with clarity, while others struggle with scattered attention. Training your brain to think like a genius requires many habits, but focus sits near the center of them all. Because when your attention becomes powerful, your thinking becomes powerful as well. Chapter 6. Build the habit of daily mental exercise. A strong mind is not built in a single moment of inspiration. It is built the same way a strong body is built, through regular exercise. Many people assume intelligence is something fixed, something you either have or you do not. But modern research and centuries of observation reveal a different truth. The brain is remarkably adaptable. It grows stronger, faster, and more efficient when it is challenged consistently. When you use your mind actively, it develops new connections. When you neglect it, those connections weaken. In simple terms, the brain becomes better at whatever it practices. Think about what happens when someone begins physical training. The first few workouts feel uncomfortable. Muscles feel weak, movements feel awkward, but as the training continues, the body adapts, muscles strengthen, endurance improves, and tasks that once felt difficult begin to feel natural. The brain works in exactly the same way. When you regularly challenge your mind with new ideas, difficult problems, or unfamiliar skills, your mental capacity begins to expand. Memory improves, attention strengthens, creativity increases, the mind becomes more flexible and capable of handling complex situations. The problem is that many people rarely exercise their thinking. Daily routines often rely on habits that require little mental effort. Repeating the same tasks, consuming passive entertainment, or following familiar patterns keeps the brain comfortable but not challenged. Over time, the mind settles into a narrow range of thinking. A genius mindset requires something different. It requires deliberate mental training. This does not mean solving complicated equations all day or studying endlessly. Mental exercise can take many forms. The key is to engage your brain in ways that require effort, curiosity, and active thinking. One powerful form of mental exercise is learning something new. When you study a new language, explore a new subject, or develop a new skill, your brain forms fresh neural pathways. These connections strengthen the brain's ability to process information and adapt to challenges. For example, someone learning to play a musical instrument must coordinate memory, attention, and physical movement. At first, the process feels slow and awkward, but with practice, the brain becomes more efficient. Skills that once required intense concentration begin to flow naturally. This same process strengthens overall cognitive ability. Another excellent form of mental exercise is problem solving. Puzzles, strategy games, and logical challenges force the brain to analyze patterns and test different possibilities. Even simple activities like crosswords, chess, or brain teasers encourage deeper thinking. But perhaps the most powerful exercise is reflective thinking. This involves taking time to analyze your own experiences and ideas. At the end of the day, you might ask yourself a few simple questions. What did I learn today? What mistake taught me something valuable? What could I improve tomorrow? These questions push the brain to examine experiences instead of simply moving past them. Over time, reflection sharpens judgment and strengthens learning. Writing is another effective mental workout. When you write down your thoughts, your brain must organize ideas clearly. Vague feelings become structured sentences. Complex thoughts become easier to examine. Many great thinkers kept journals for this reason. Writing helped them clarify their thinking and explore ideas more deeply. Mental exercise also benefits from variety. Just as physical training involves different movements for different muscle groups, mental training becomes stronger when it includes different types of challenges. Reading stimulates comprehension and imagination. Problem-solving strengthens logic. Learning new skills enhances adaptability. Creative activities expand imagination. Together, these exercises create a balanced and resilient mind. It is important to remember that consistency matters more than intensity. Just as the body improves through regular workouts rather than occasional bursts of effort, the brain grows stronger through daily engagement. Even small periods of mental training each day can produce remarkable improvements over time. 10 or 20 minutes of focused learning, reading, or reflection can gradually reshape the way your mind operates. Another benefit of daily mental exercise is confidence. When you consistently challenge your brain, you begin to trust its ability to handle difficult problems. Challenges that once seemed intimidating begin to feel manageable. Your mind becomes less afraid of complexity because it has practiced navigating it. This confidence fuels further growth. Of course, the brain also requires rest. Just as muscles recover between workouts, the mind benefits from periods of relaxation and sleep. During rest, the brain organizes information and strengthens newly formed connections. This balance between effort and recovery allows mental growth to continue. But the most important principle remains simple. The mind must be used to become powerful. Every day offers an opportunity to train your thinking. Each book you read, each idea you explore, each problem you attempt to solve becomes another repetition in your mental workout. Over time, these small exercises compound. Your mind becomes sharper, more curious, and more capable of understanding complex ideas. And gradually, without sudden transformation or dramatic breakthroughs, you begin to notice something remarkable. Your brain starts working at a higher level than it once did. That is the quiet power of daily mental exercise. Chapter 7. Turn curiosity into a superpower. Curiosity is the quiet engine behind every great discovery. Long before breakthroughs appear, curiosity asks the first question. Long before knowledge expands, curiosity opens the door. A curious mind refuses to accept the world at face value. It looks at ordinary things and wonders how they work. It hears an idea and asks where it came from. It encounters a problem and feels a strong urge to explore the answer. This simple habit of questioning and exploring is one of the most powerful traits shared by great thinkers throughout history. Unfortunately, curiosity often fades as people grow older. Children ask questions constantly. They want to know why the sky changes color, how birds fly, why machines move the way they do. Their minds are naturally driven by curiosity. Every object, every experience, every new word becomes something to investigate. But as people move through school and adulthood, that instinct often becomes quieter. Many environments reward quick answers instead of thoughtful questions. People are sometimes made to feel embarrassed for asking too many questions or exploring unusual ideas. Gradually, curiosity becomes replaced by routine thinking. Yet the mind of a genius never loses that curiosity. Great thinkers remain fascinated by the world around them. They approach life with the same sense of wonder that children display naturally. Instead of assuming they understand everything, they remain eager to explore deeper layers of knowledge. Leonardo da Vinci is a perfect example of this mindset. His notebooks reveal thousands of questions about the world. He studied the movement of water, the flight of birds, the structure of the human body, and the mechanics of machines. His curiosity stretched across art, science, engineering, and anatomy. He was not curious about one subject. He was curious about everything. This curiosity allowed him to see connections between ideas that others never considered. Observations about bird wings influenced his designs for flying machines. His study of anatomy improved his artistic ability. His curiosity in one area constantly enriched his thinking in another. The same principle applies to anyone who wishes to train their brain to think more powerfully. Curiosity expands the mind because it leads you into new territory. Each question invites exploration. Each exploration introduces new information. Over time, these discoveries build a richer understanding of how the world works. But curiosity does more than gather knowledge. It also strengthens creativity. When the mind asks questions, it begins searching for patterns and possibilities. Instead of seeing fixed boundaries, a curious thinker sees open doors. Problems become puzzles waiting to be solved. Ordinary objects become sources of inspiration. Imagine walking through a city street. One person may simply notice traffic and buildings. Another person, guided by curiosity, may begin asking questions. How were these structures designed? What materials allow them to stand so tall? How does the traffic system coordinate thousands of vehicles every day? Each question opens a deeper layer of understanding. Curiosity also protects the mind from complacency. When people believe they already know everything they need to know, learning stops. Growth slows. The mind becomes rigid and predictable. A curious thinker avoids this trap. They recognize that knowledge is always incomplete. No matter how much they understand, there is always another layer waiting to be discovered. This attitude keeps the mind flexible and open to new ideas. You can begin strengthening your curiosity with a simple practice. Whenever you encounter something interesting, pause and ask yourself a few questions. How does this work? Why was it designed this way? What problem was it meant to solve? These small moments of questioning gradually reshape your thinking. Another powerful habit is exploring subjects outside your usual interests. If you normally study business, read about science or psychology. If you enjoy technology, explore philosophy or history. Curiosity across different fields expands your mental landscape and allows ideas to connect in unexpected ways. Many breakthroughs occur when knowledge from one area influences another. Curiosity also improves learning because it makes information meaningful. When you genuinely want to understand something, your brain becomes more attentive. You notice details more easily. You remember information more clearly because it satisfies a question your mind was already asking. Learning becomes exciting rather than forced. One important aspect of curiosity is humility. To remain curious, you must accept that there are many things you do not yet understand. This attitude frees the mind from the pressure of pretending to know everything. Instead of defending existing beliefs, you become comfortable exploring new ideas. This openness is essential for intellectual growth. The good news is that curiosity is not a rare talent. It is a habit that can be strengthened through practice. Each time you choose exploration over assumption, your curiosity grows stronger. Each time you investigate an idea instead of ignoring it, your mind becomes more engaged with the world. Gradually, curiosity begins guiding your thinking. You notice patterns more quickly. You discover connections others overlook. Your understanding becomes deeper because your mind is constantly searching for meaning, and over time, curiosity transforms from a simple interest into a powerful mental advantage. What began as a small question becomes a lifelong engine for learning, creativity, and discovery. That is why curiosity is not just a personality trait, it is a superpower for the thinking mind. Chapter 8. Use leverage wisely to accelerate your wealth. Leverage is one of the most misunderstood ideas in the world of money. Some people hear the word and immediately think of danger, too much debt, too much risk, too many stories of financial collapse. Others hear the word and imagine shortcuts to instant wealth. In reality, leverage is neither magic nor disaster. It is simply a tool, and like any tool, its value depends entirely on how wisely it is used. At its simplest level, leverage means using resources beyond your own to achieve greater results. Instead of relying only on your personal effort or your personal money, leverage allows you to expand your reach through systems, capital, knowledge, and the efforts of others. When used responsibly, leverage can accelerate the growth of the financial machine you are building. Think about how a physical lever works. A small amount of force applied at the right point can move an object far heavier than what a person could lift alone. The lever does not remove the need for effort, it multiplies the effect of that effort. Financial leverage works in much the same way. Consider a simple example. Imagine a person trying to build wealth entirely from their savings. Each asset they acquire must be purchased using only the money they personally earn and save. This method works, but it can be slow because progress depends entirely on how quickly that person can accumulate capital. Now imagine another person who uses leverage carefully. They still invest their own money, but they also use other resources, partnerships, shared investments, or responsible financing to acquire assets more efficiently. Instead of building one small asset at a time over many years, leverage allows them to expand the system faster. The key word here is responsibly. Leverage becomes dangerous when it is used without understanding the risks. Borrowing money to buy things that lose value quickly can trap people in financial stress. Using leverage for consumption is often the path that leads to financial problems, but using leverage to acquire productive assets can be very different. For example, imagine someone purchasing an asset that generates income each month. If that asset produces more income than the cost required to maintain it, the system begins working in their favor. The asset supports itself and contributes additional value over time. In this situation, leverage has been used as a tool to accelerate the growth of the machine. Another powerful form of leverage comes from people. No individual can build a large financial system entirely alone. Businesses grow through teams, investments expand through partnerships, skills multiply when people collaborate and combine their strengths. Think about the difference between working alone and leading a small team. One person has 24 hours in a day, but a team of 5 people has 5 times that productive capacity. When efforts are organized and aligned toward a common goal, the results expand far beyond what any single person could achieve. Knowledge is another form of leverage. Learning from those who have already built successful systems can dramatically shorten the learning curve. Instead of discovering every lesson through trial and error, you gain access to strategies that have already been tested and refined. Books, mentors, and education become tools that expand your ability to make better decisions. Technology also provides powerful leverage. Systems created through technology can serve thousands or even millions of people simultaneously. A single idea, once transformed into a scalable system, can reach far beyond the limits of individual effort. All of these forms of leverage share the same principle. They multiply the effect of your actions. But leverage must always be approached with discipline. One of the most common mistakes people make is attempting to grow too quickly without understanding the systems they are building. Rapid expansion without strong foundations can create fragile structures. When pressure appears, those structures collapse. Wealth builders avoid this by focusing first on stability. They build systems that work reliably before expanding them. They understand the assets they acquire and the risks involved. Only after the foundation is strong do they begin using leverage to accelerate growth. Another important principle is control. When using leverage, it is important to ensure that the systems you build remain manageable. Growth should not create chaos. The goal is not to create complexity for the sake of speed. The goal is to build a machine that grows stronger while remaining stable. Imagine a train moving down a track. Adding more power can make the train move faster, but only if the track is strong enough to support the speed. If the track is weak, increasing the power only leads to derailment. Leverage increases power, but the track, the structure of your financial systems must be solid. Used wisely, leverage allows the money machine to grow beyond the limits of your personal effort. It allows small beginnings to expand into meaningful systems. It transforms slow progress into accelerating momentum. But the purpose of leverage is not speed alone. The purpose is efficiency. When used carefully, leverage helps you build assets faster, expand opportunities more intelligently, and strengthen the systems that generate income. And as those systems grow stronger, the machine you are building becomes capable of producing results that would have been impossible through effort alone. Chapter 9. Think in possibilities instead of limitations. The direction of your thinking determines the direction of your life. When the mind constantly focuses on limitations, it begins to see walls everywhere. When the mind focuses on possibilities, it begins to see doors. This difference may sound simple, but it has enormous consequences. Many people train their brains, often without realizing it, to search for obstacles first. When an idea appears, the mind quickly lists all the reasons it might fail. When an opportunity emerges, the brain immediately considers the risks. When a challenge arises, attention goes straight to the difficulty. This habit of limitation thinking slowly shrinks the boundaries of what people believe is possible. Now, it is important to understand something clearly. Recognizing obstacles is not wrong. Reality contains real constraints, and wise thinkers consider them carefully. But there is a difference between analyzing obstacles and becoming mentally trapped by them. A limitation-focused mind stops thinking as soon as it finds a reason something might not work. A possibility-focused mind asks a different question: how might this work? This small shift in thinking unlocks creativity and innovation. Consider the early days of powered flight. Before airplanes existed, the idea of humans flying through the air seemed unrealistic to many experts. Engineers and scientists often focused on the limitations: weight, gravity, mechanical difficulty. Their reasoning seemed logical, but it kept their thinking confined within existing assumptions. The Wright brothers approached the challenge differently. They acknowledged the obstacles, but their attention remained fixed on possibility. Instead of asking whether flight was practical, they asked how it might become practical. They experimented, adjusted their designs, studied birds, and learned from each failure. Possibility thinking kept their minds open long enough for solutions to emerge. This pattern appears repeatedly in history. Many innovations begin with someone refusing to accept the limits that others assume are permanent. The first electric lights, automobiles, computers, and space missions all began as ideas that seemed unrealistic at first. What separated the innovators from the skeptics was not simply intelligence, it was their mental orientation toward possibility. A possibility-focused mind behaves differently when it encounters difficulty. Instead of stopping at the first obstacle, it begins searching for alternatives. If one method fails, it explores another. If the current resources are insufficient, it looks for creative ways to expand them. This persistence transforms challenges into puzzles rather than barriers. The brain becomes more inventive when it is encouraged to search for possibilities. Each time you ask your mind how something might work, it begins exploring solutions. It analyzes information, combines ideas, and tests different approaches. Sometimes the answers appear quickly. Other times they require patience and experimentation, but the key is that the thinking process continues. By contrast, limitation thinking shuts down this process. The moment the brain decides that something is impossible, it stops searching for answers. Creativity disappears because the mind has already reached its conclusion. Training your brain to think in possibilities requires conscious effort. The mind naturally notices problems first because problems often demand attention, but you can guide your thinking by changing the questions you ask. When you encounter a challenge, instead of immediately asking why it cannot work, ask yourself what would need to change for it to work. This question shifts your brain into solution mode. Instead of analyzing failure, it begins exploring potential paths forward. Another powerful habit is studying examples of success in difficult situations. When you learn how others overcame obstacles, your brain begins expanding its sense of what is possible. Stories of innovation, persistence, and creative problem-solving provide evidence that limitations are often temporary. This evidence strengthens your belief in possibility. Possibility thinking also encourages experimentation. When you accept that progress often involves trial and error, failure becomes less intimidating. Each attempt becomes a learning step rather than a final judgment. This mindset fuels growth. Imagine an entrepreneur developing a new product. The first version may not work perfectly. The second version may still have flaws, but each improvement moves the idea closer to success. A possibility-focused thinker understands that solutions often appear through iteration. They keep moving forward. Another benefit of possibility thinking is that it inspires others. People are naturally drawn to individuals who believe improvement is possible. Leaders, innovators, and visionaries often create momentum because their optimism encourages others to explore new ideas. Energy spreads through belief. However, possibility thinking must remain grounded in reality. Blind optimism without effort accomplishes little. True possibility thinking combines imagination with action. It encourages you to explore new ideas while remaining disciplined enough to test them carefully. This balance creates progress. As you train your brain to focus on possibilities, your perception of the world begins to change. Opportunities become easier to notice because your mind is actively searching for them. Challenges become less intimidating because you see them as solvable problems. Your thinking becomes expansive rather than restrictive, and gradually something powerful happens. Instead of waiting for opportunities to appear, you begin creating them. Because a mind that sees possibilities is a mind that moves forward, explores boldly, and transforms ideas into reality. Chapter 10. Strengthen your ability to solve difficult problems. Every meaningful achievement begins with a problem. Some problems appear small and simple, others seem complex and overwhelming. But in every field, science, business, technology, art, and even personal growth, the individuals who make the greatest progress are those who develop the ability to face difficult problems without turning away. The truth is, your success in life is closely connected to the kinds of problems you are willing to solve. Many people avoid difficult problems because they trigger discomfort. When something feels confusing or complicated, the brain naturally seeks easier tasks. It prefers activities that produce quick results rather than situations that require extended effort. But the mind of a genius moves in the opposite direction. Instead of avoiding complexity, it becomes curious about it. Difficult problems are treated as puzzles waiting to be understood. This shift in attitude transforms frustration into exploration. Think about the work of great inventors. When Thomas Edison worked on developing the electric light bulb, he faced thousands of unsuccessful experiments. Many materials failed to produce the desired result. Many designs collapsed before functioning properly. To an outside observer, these repeated failures might have looked like wasted effort. But Edison saw something different. Each attempt revealed new information about what worked and what did not. Instead of treating failure as a final result, he treated it as a step toward the solution. That is the mindset required for solving difficult problems. The first skill in problem solving is learning to define the problem clearly. Often people struggle not because the solution is impossible, but because the problem itself has not been properly understood. When a situation feels confusing, take a moment to describe it in simple terms. Ask yourself, what exactly is happening? What result do I want to achieve? What factors might be influencing the outcome? Clarity reduces complexity. Once the problem is clearly defined, the next step is breaking it into smaller parts. Large problems often appear intimidating because they contain many moving pieces, but when you divide the situation into manageable components, each part becomes easier to analyze. Imagine a large puzzle. If you try to understand the entire picture at once, it may seem overwhelming, but when you examine individual pieces and how they connect, the image gradually becomes clear. The same method applies to thinking. Another important habit is gathering information before jumping to conclusions. The human mind sometimes rushes toward the first explanation that appears plausible. While this instinct can be useful in simple situations, it often leads to mistakes when dealing with complex problems. A trained thinker pauses to examine multiple possibilities. They ask questions. What evidence supports this explanation? Are there alternative causes? What information might still be missing? This careful investigation prevents the brain from settling on weak conclusions. Creative thinking also plays a role in problem solving. Sometimes the most effective solution comes from looking at the problem from a different perspective. Instead of asking how to fix the situation using familiar methods, ask whether the entire approach could change. Many breakthroughs occur when someone challenges the standard assumptions surrounding a problem. For example, when engineers attempted to improve transportation in crowded cities, they initially focused on building better roads. But eventually someone asked a different question: what if people could travel above the traffic instead of through it? That shift in thinking eventually led to the development of subway systems, elevated railways, and other creative transportation solutions. The solution appeared only after the perspective changed. Another valuable technique is patience. Difficult problems rarely reveal their answers immediately. They require sustained attention and repeated experimentation. Your brain may need time to process information and explore different possibilities. Sometimes stepping away from the problem briefly can help. When you relax your mind, the brain continues working quietly in the background. Many people have experienced moments when a solution suddenly appears after a period of rest. This is not magic, it is the mind reorganizing information in a new way. It is also important to remember that mistakes are part of the process. Every unsuccessful attempt provides feedback. Each error reveals something about what does not work, which brings you closer to discovering what does. A person who fears mistakes stops experimenting. A person who accepts mistakes continues learning. Problem solving also improves through collaboration. Discussing challenges with thoughtful people exposes your mind to perspectives you may not have considered. Sometimes another person's observation can illuminate an aspect of the problem that you overlooked. Great thinkers often surround themselves with other curious minds for this reason. But ultimately, the responsibility for solving problems rests with you. When you encounter difficulty, you have two choices. You can step back and wait for someone else to provide the answer, or you can engage your mind fully and begin searching for the solution. The second choice is the one that strengthens your thinking. Each problem you attempt to solve becomes a mental workout. Your brain becomes more comfortable analyzing complex situations. Your confidence grows because you know you can face challenges without becoming overwhelmed. Over time, problems that once seemed impossible begin to look manageable, and gradually, something remarkable happens. While others avoid difficulty, you begin moving toward it, because you understand that every difficult problem contains the seed of growth, discovery, and opportunity. That is how powerful thinking develops. Chapter 11. Develop the courage to think differently. Every great breakthrough in history began with someone who dared to think differently. This kind of thinking often feels uncomfortable at first. Human beings naturally prefer agreement and acceptance. From an early age, we learn that fitting in with others brings safety and approval. When our ideas match the group, we feel confident and secure. But when our thoughts move in a different direction, doubt and resistance often appear. That is why thinking differently requires courage. The crowd has a powerful influence on the mind. When many people believe something, the brain assumes it must be correct. This assumption simplifies decision-making, but it also limits creativity. If everyone accepts the same ideas without question, progress slows. Independent thinking breaks that pattern. Consider how many innovations were initially rejected simply because they challenged common beliefs. When Nikola Tesla proposed new ways of generating and distributing electricity, many experts dismissed his ideas as impractical. When new theories in science challenged traditional models of the universe, they were often criticized before being understood. Yet progress moved forward because certain individuals trusted their reasoning enough to continue exploring their ideas. Thinking differently does not mean rejecting every popular opinion. That approach would be reckless. Instead, it means giving yourself permission to question assumptions and explore ideas that others may overlook. A courageous thinker asks questions such as, is there another way to approach this problem? What if the opposite of the common belief were true? What solution might appear if we changed our perspective? These questions create space for innovation. But the path of independent thinking is rarely comfortable. When your ideas challenge familiar beliefs, people may react with skepticism. They may dismiss your thoughts or criticize your approach. Sometimes this resistance is helpful because it forces you to refine your reasoning, but other times it simply reflects the discomfort people feel when their assumptions are challenged. The key is learning how to evaluate criticism wisely. Constructive criticism improves ideas. It reveals weaknesses that can be corrected. Destructive criticism, on the other hand, often comes from people who resist change rather than analyze it. A strong thinker learns to distinguish between the two. For example, imagine a young entrepreneur proposing a new business idea that differs from traditional methods. Some people may offer thoughtful questions that highlight practical concerns. These questions are valuable because they strengthen the idea, but others may dismiss the idea simply because it seems unusual. A courageous thinker listens carefully but does not abandon their vision without thoughtful evaluation. Another important aspect of thinking differently is trusting your own observations. When you study a subject deeply, your mind begins noticing patterns and insights that others may not see yet. These insights are valuable, but they can feel fragile if they conflict with widely accepted opinions. Confidence grows through careful reasoning and experience. The more you study, experiment, and analyze ideas, the stronger your intellectual foundation becomes. Instead of relying on popularity to judge whether an idea is correct, you begin evaluating evidence and logic. This independence strengthens your thinking. History offers many examples of individuals who maintained their ideas despite opposition. When Galileo suggested that the Earth moved around the Sun, his conclusions challenged long-standing beliefs. The reaction from many authorities was intense criticism, yet his observations and evidence eventually changed humanity's understanding of the universe. Progress often requires someone to step outside conventional thinking. Of course, independent thinking must remain balanced with humility. Confidence in your ideas should never become arrogance. A wise thinker remains open to learning and adjusting their perspective when new evidence appears. True intellectual courage includes the willingness to revise your thinking when necessary. This balance between confidence and humility creates strong reasoning. You are willing to explore new ideas, but you also remain disciplined enough to test them carefully. Developing the courage to think differently also strengthens creativity. When you stop limiting your thinking to what others expect, your imagination begins exploring new possibilities. Solutions emerge that would never appear within rigid boundaries. The mind becomes more flexible and innovative. One helpful practice is regularly challenging your own assumptions. Whenever you hold a strong opinion, ask yourself how someone with the opposite perspective might view the situation. This exercise forces your brain to examine ideas more deeply and prevents rigid thinking. Another useful habit is exposing yourself to diverse viewpoints. Reading widely, studying different cultures, and engaging in thoughtful conversations expands your understanding of how people interpret the world. This diversity of ideas encourages independent thinking. Gradually, your mind becomes less dependent on social approval and more committed to intellectual honesty. This shift is powerful. Instead of asking whether your ideas will be popular, you begin asking whether they are true. Instead of fearing disagreement, you begin welcoming thoughtful debate. Instead of avoiding unusual perspectives, you explore them with curiosity. Your thinking becomes stronger because it is guided by reasoning rather than pressure. In time, you realize something important. The greatest thinkers are not those who follow the loudest voices. They are the ones who quietly examine the world, trust their ability to reason, and remain courageous enough to explore ideas that others hesitate to consider. That courage is one of the defining traits of a genius mind. Chapter 12. Turn failure into mental fuel. Failure is one of the most misunderstood experiences in life. Many people see it as proof that they are not capable, not talented, or not intelligent enough. When something goes wrong, they treat it as a final judgment on their abilities. The result is predictable. They withdraw, avoid risk, and become cautious about trying again. But the mind of a genius sees failure very differently. To a trained thinker, failure is information, it is feedback. It is one of the most powerful tools the brain can use to improve its understanding of the world. Instead of asking, "Why did I fail?" in a way that creates discouragement, a disciplined mind asks, "What did this teach me?" This shift transforms failure from an obstacle into a source of progress. Think about how children learn to walk. The process involves falling repeatedly. No child stands up for the first time and walks perfectly across the room. They stumble, lose balance, and fall over again and again. But something important happens during each attempt. The brain gathers information about movement, balance, and coordination. With each fall, the mind adjusts its approach. Eventually, walking becomes natural. Now imagine if a child interpreted those early falls as proof that walking was impossible. The skill would never develop. Progress happens precisely because the brain treats mistakes as part of learning rather than evidence of defeat. This same principle applies to every area of life. Consider the story of James Dyson, the inventor who created the bagless vacuum cleaner. His invention did not appear instantly. Before achieving success, he built more than 5,000 prototypes. Each design contained flaws that prevented it from functioning correctly. To many people, thousands of unsuccessful attempts would feel like overwhelming failure. But Dyson viewed each prototype as a lesson. Each mistake revealed something about airflow, engineering, and design. With every adjustment, he moved closer to a working solution. Eventually, his persistence produced a product that transformed an entire industry. The lesson here is powerful. Failure becomes valuable when it is examined carefully. The brain learns through experimentation. Every time you attempt something difficult, your mind gathers information about what works and what does not. If you analyze that information honestly, you improve your chances of success during the next attempt. This is why successful thinkers rarely fear failure. They understand that every significant achievement involves a series of imperfect attempts. Each step provides feedback that sharpens understanding. Over time, the lessons accumulate until a breakthrough appears. Of course, experiencing failure can still feel uncomfortable. Emotions such as frustration, disappointment, or embarrassment are natural responses. But a disciplined mind learns how to manage those emotions without allowing them to control future decisions. Instead of dwelling on the disappointment, focus on the lesson. Ask yourself a few clear questions. What exactly went wrong? Which factors contributed to the outcome? What could be improved next time? These questions transform failure into a learning process rather than a personal judgment. Writing down your reflections can be especially useful. When you record what happened and what you learned, your brain organizes the experience more clearly. Patterns begin to emerge. You start recognizing which strategies produce better results and which ones need adjustment. This process turns experience into wisdom. Another important principle is separating failure from identity. A mistake does not define who you are, it simply reflects the outcome of a particular attempt. When people attach their identity to success or failure, they become emotionally trapped by each result. A trained thinker avoids this trap. They view themselves as learners. Each challenge becomes an opportunity to refine skills and improve understanding. This mindset encourages resilience because the focus remains on growth rather than perfection. Failure also strengthens creativity. When the first solution fails, the brain must search for alternative approaches. This search encourages innovation. Some of the most creative breakthroughs appear only after several conventional solutions have failed. Limitations force the mind to explore new ideas. This is why many inventors deliberately experiment with bold or unusual approaches. Even if those experiments fail, they often reveal insights that lead to better designs. The process of exploration expands the mind's capacity for creative thinking. Resilience is another benefit of embracing failure. Each time you recover from a setback, your confidence grows stronger. You realize that mistakes do not destroy progress, they guide it. This realization reduces fear and encourages continued effort. Eventually, the brain begins treating challenges as opportunities rather than threats. It is important to remember that failure only becomes valuable when it is followed by reflection and adjustment. Repeating the same mistake without learning from it leads nowhere, but when you carefully analyze each attempt, failure becomes a teacher. The key is persistence guided by insight. As you train your brain to use failure as mental fuel, your relationship with difficulty changes. Instead of avoiding challenges, you begin approaching them with curiosity. You recognize that every attempt, successful or not, contributes to your development. Your thinking becomes more resilient, more adaptable, and more confident. And gradually, you realize something that many people never discover. Failure is not the opposite of success. It is one of the most powerful tools that leads you there. Chapter 13. Train your brain to stay calm under pressure. Clear thinking requires a calm mind. When pressure rises, the human brain often reacts with urgency and emotion. Heart rate increases, attention narrows, and the mind begins searching for quick reactions rather than thoughtful responses. This reaction is natural. It is part of the body's survival system. In moments of danger, rapid responses help protect us. But many of the challenges we face today are not life-threatening emergencies. They are complex decisions, demanding responsibilities, and stressful situations that require careful judgment. When the mind becomes overwhelmed by pressure, thinking becomes scattered and impulsive. Decisions are made too quickly, details are overlooked, and problems grow more complicated. The ability to remain calm during pressure is therefore one of the most valuable mental skills you can develop. Think about the difference between two people facing the same challenge. One person reacts immediately with panic or frustration. Their thoughts race, their emotions intensify, and their decisions become rushed. The other person pauses, breathes, and examines the situation with steady attention. Both individuals have the same problem, but their mental states produce very different results. A calm mind has access to deeper reasoning. It can analyze information more carefully and consider multiple options. Instead of reacting emotionally, it evaluates the situation with patience. Many professionals whose work involves high stakes train themselves specifically to remain calm under pressure. Surgeons must perform delicate procedures while knowing that lives depend on their precision. Airline pilots must manage complex systems while staying composed during unexpected situations. Elite athletes must make strategic decisions while thousands of spectators watch. In all of these cases, emotional control protects clear thinking. One reason calmness improves thinking is that stress narrows attention. When people feel overwhelmed, their brains focus only on the immediate threat. This can be useful in emergencies, but it often prevents thoughtful analysis. Important details may be ignored because the mind is fixated on urgency. Calmness widens perspective. When you slow your breathing and relax your mind, your brain regains the ability to examine the situation fully. You notice factors that were previously hidden. Solutions that seemed impossible begin to appear. This skill can be trained through simple habits. The first step is learning to pause before reacting. When pressure appears, the instinct is often to respond immediately. But a brief pause can change everything. Taking a moment to breathe deeply signals the nervous system to relax. This short delay allows your mind to regain control before making decisions. A few seconds of calm thinking can prevent many mistakes. Another helpful practice is separating the situation from your emotional reaction. When something stressful happens, it is easy to become absorbed by frustration or fear. But if you step back mentally and observe the situation objectively, your thinking becomes clearer. Ask yourself, what exactly is happening right now? What part of this situation can I influence? What action would move things forward? These questions shift your attention from emotion to strategy. Preparation also strengthens calmness under pressure. The more familiar you are with a task or challenge, the less intimidating it becomes. Professionals often rehearse difficult scenarios so their brains become accustomed to handling them. When the real moment arrives, their minds already recognize the pattern. This familiarity reduces panic. Athletes provide a powerful example of this principle. During training, they repeat movements thousands of times. Their bodies and minds learn exactly how to respond. When the pressure of competition appears, their training guides them. Instead of becoming overwhelmed by the moment, they rely on habits built through preparation. Your mind can develop similar habits. Visualization is another technique that improves calm thinking. Before facing a challenging situation, imagine yourself responding with clarity and composure. Picture the steps you will take and the mindset you will maintain. This mental rehearsal prepares your brain to handle pressure more effectively. When the real situation appears, your mind recognizes the pattern and responds more calmly. Perspective also plays an important role. Many stressful situations feel overwhelming because we treat them as permanent or catastrophic. But when you step back and examine the larger picture, the pressure often becomes more manageable. Ask yourself whether the problem will still matter months or years from now. In many cases, the answer reveals that the situation is temporary. This broader perspective reduces emotional intensity and allows clearer thinking. Finally, remember that calmness is a skill developed through practice. No one remains perfectly composed in every situation. Even experienced professionals feel moments of stress or uncertainty. The difference is that they have trained their minds to recover quickly. Each time you face pressure and choose calm thinking instead of panic, you strengthen this ability. Over time, your brain becomes more resilient. Situations that once felt overwhelming begin to feel manageable. Your mind learns that pressure does not require chaos. It can be handled with patience, clarity, and steady attention. And when your mind stays calm, something remarkable happens. Your thinking becomes sharper exactly when it matters most. That is one of the quiet strengths of a trained mind. Chapter 14. Build the discipline of lifelong learning. A powerful mind never stops learning. One of the biggest differences between ordinary thinking and extraordinary thinking is the attitude toward learning. Many people treat education as something that belongs only to school. Once formal education ends, they assume the learning phase of life is finished. They enter routines, repeat familiar habits, and rarely challenge their minds with new ideas. But the greatest thinkers in history followed a different path. For them, learning never ended. It was not limited to classrooms, degrees, or exams. Learning became a lifelong discipline, a daily habit of curiosity and improvement. This mindset keeps the brain active and expanding. The world changes constantly. New discoveries appear. Technology evolves, societies shift, and knowledge grows in every field. A person who stops learning gradually becomes disconnected from this movement. Their thinking becomes outdated because it relies on old assumptions. A lifelong learner stays mentally alive. Consider individuals who achieve long-term success in demanding fields. Scientists continue studying new research throughout their careers. Entrepreneurs read widely about markets, psychology, and innovation. Skilled professionals constantly update their knowledge so they can adapt to changing environments. Their advantage is not just talent, it is the discipline of continuous learning. This discipline strengthens the brain in several important ways. First, it keeps the mind flexible. When you regularly encounter new ideas, your brain becomes comfortable with change. Instead of resisting unfamiliar concepts, you begin exploring them with curiosity. Second, lifelong learning expands your understanding of the world. Each new piece of knowledge becomes another lens through which you interpret events. History helps you understand patterns in society. Psychology helps you understand human behavior. Science reveals the laws governing nature. As these insights accumulate, your thinking becomes deeper and more connected. Another powerful benefit is intellectual confidence. When you continuously improve your knowledge and skills, you trust your ability to adapt. Challenges no longer feel intimidating because you know you can learn whatever is necessary to solve them. This confidence encourages bold thinking. One of the simplest ways to practice lifelong learning is through reading. Books allow you to access decades of experience and research in a few hours of focused attention. A well-written book can introduce you to ideas that might otherwise take years to discover through personal trial and error. Great readers often develop wide-ranging knowledge because they explore many subjects. For example, someone who reads about history learns how societies rise and fall. Someone who studies psychology gains insight into motivation and behavior. Someone who reads about science learns how natural systems operate. When these subjects connect in the mind, they create a rich intellectual framework. This framework strengthens decision-making. Learning also becomes more powerful when you apply what you study. Knowledge that remains abstract often fades quickly. But when you use new ideas in real situations, whether in work, conversation, or problem-solving, your brain reinforces those concepts. Application turns information into skill. Another important aspect of lifelong learning is humility. A person who believes they already know everything becomes resistant to new ideas. This attitude closes the door to growth. In contrast, a humble thinker recognizes that knowledge is always incomplete. There is always more to discover. This humility keeps curiosity alive. It encourages you to ask questions, listen carefully to others, and explore unfamiliar subjects. Instead of protecting your current beliefs, you allow your thinking to evolve. That evolution strengthens wisdom. Modern technology has made learning more accessible than ever before. Audiobooks, online courses, lectures, and digital libraries place enormous knowledge within reach. But access alone does not create growth. Growth requires intention. You must choose to use these resources regularly. Creating a simple learning routine can make a powerful difference. For example, dedicating a small portion of each day to reading or studying can gradually transform your knowledge base. Even 20 minutes of focused learning each day compounds into hundreds of hours over time. Consistency produces remarkable results. Conversations also play an important role in lifelong learning. When you exchange ideas with thoughtful people, your understanding expands. Different perspectives reveal aspects of a topic that you might not have considered. These discussions sharpen your reasoning and deepen your knowledge. Another valuable habit is reflecting on what you learn. After reading or studying something new, take a moment to ask yourself how it connects to what you already know. How could this idea be applied in real life? What new questions does it raise? Reflection transforms information into insight. Over time, the discipline of lifelong learning reshapes your mind. You become more adaptable, more curious, and more capable of understanding complex ideas. Instead of feeling overwhelmed by change, you welcome it as an opportunity to expand your thinking. Your brain remains active and engaged. And perhaps most importantly, lifelong learning keeps your sense of wonder alive. The world becomes an endless landscape of ideas waiting to be explored. A trained mind never reaches a final destination of knowledge. It continues growing, discovering, and evolving for as long as curiosity remains strong. That is the true power of lifelong learning. Chapter 15. Live like a genius every day. Training your brain to think like a genius is not a single event. It is a daily way of living. Many people imagine genius as a rare spark of brilliance that appears suddenly and transforms someone overnight. But when you look closely at the lives of great thinkers, inventors, and innovators, you see a different pattern. Their achievements were not created in one dramatic moment. They were built through small daily habits of thinking, learning, observing, and improving. Genius, in many ways, is a lifestyle. It is the result of consistent mental discipline. The way you ask questions, the way you observe the world, the way you respond to challenges, and the way you invest your attention each day gradually shapes the quality of your thinking. Over time, these small habits compound into powerful results. Living like a genius begins with awareness. You start paying attention to how your mind operates throughout the day. Are your thoughts guided by curiosity or by routine? Do you question ideas, or do you accept them automatically? Do you approach problems with creativity or do you avoid them? Awareness is the first step toward improvement. Once you become aware of your thinking patterns, you can begin shaping them deliberately. For example, you can practice observing the world more carefully. Instead of moving through your day on autopilot, slow down and notice details. Pay attention to how systems work, how people behave, and how events connect. Observation strengthens understanding. Many great thinkers developed their insights simply by noticing things that others ignored. A scientist may observe a small irregularity in an experiment that leads to a major discovery. An entrepreneur may notice an unmet need in everyday life that leads to a new business idea. These insights often begin with attentive observation. Another important habit is protecting time for deep thinking. In a world filled with constant noise and distraction, quiet reflection has become rare. Yet many of the most valuable ideas appear during moments of focused thought. Allow yourself time to sit with complex questions. Let your mind explore possibilities without rushing toward immediate answers. Your brain needs space to think deeply. Living like a genius also means maintaining intellectual curiosity. Instead of assuming you already understand the world, continue asking questions. Why do certain systems succeed while others fail? What lessons can be learned from history? How might new technologies reshape society? Curiosity keeps the mind expanding. At the same time, discipline must guide curiosity. A genius mindset is not simply about having many ideas, it is about following ideas with effort and persistence. When you begin studying a subject or developing a skill, stay with it long enough to gain meaningful understanding. Surface-level knowledge rarely produces breakthroughs. Consistency is the secret ingredient behind most extraordinary achievements. Reading regularly, reflecting on experiences, analyzing problems, and exploring new subjects day after day gradually strengthen your mental abilities. The progress may feel slow at first, but over time it becomes profound. Another key aspect of living like a genius is embracing responsibility for your thinking. Instead of blaming circumstances or waiting for external inspiration, take ownership of how your mind develops. Choose the ideas you expose yourself to, choose the habits you practice, choose the standards you hold for your thinking. This responsibility empowers growth. It is also important to remain humble. No matter how much knowledge you gain, there will always be more to learn. The world is vast and complex, filled with mysteries that no single person can fully understand. Humility protects curiosity. When you remain open to learning from others, your mind continues evolving. Conversations, books, and experiences become sources of insight. Instead of defending your current beliefs, you refine them through exploration and evidence. This openness strengthens wisdom. Another important element of the genius lifestyle is resilience. Challenges and setbacks are inevitable when pursuing difficult ideas. Experiments fail, plans change, and progress sometimes slows. But these obstacles are not signs that you should stop thinking creatively. They are invitations to adjust your approach. A resilient mind treats difficulty as part of the journey. Each challenge provides feedback that improves your understanding. Over time, resilience transforms setbacks into stepping stones. Perhaps the most powerful realization is that genius is not reserved for a select few individuals. The human brain possesses extraordinary potential. When you train it with curiosity, discipline, reflection, and persistence, it begins operating at a higher level. Ideas become clearer, connections become easier to see, problems become opportunities for exploration. Living like a genius simply means choosing these habits every day. You ask better questions, you remain curious, you protect your focus, you learn continuously, you observe carefully, you face challenges with determination. Each of these choices strengthens the way your mind works, and as days turn into months and months into years, those choices reshape your thinking, until one day you realize something remarkable. Your mind has become sharper, deeper, and more creative than it once was. Not because of a sudden miracle, but because you trained it one thoughtful day at a time. Conclusion. The human brain is one of the most powerful tools ever created. It has built civilizations, solved mysteries of the universe, and transformed ideas into inventions that shape the world. Yet for many people, this remarkable tool remains underused, not because they lack intelligence, but because they were never taught how to train their thinking. This audiobook was built around one simple truth: genius is not a mysterious gift reserved for a rare few. It is a way of thinking that can be developed through deliberate habits. Throughout these chapters, you have explored the foundations of a trained mind. You learned why stepping away from crowd thinking allows original ideas to emerge. You discovered the power of asking better questions and thinking deeply instead of quickly. You saw how the information you feed your mind shapes the quality of your thinking, and how focus strengthens the brain's ability to explore complex ideas. You also learned that the mind grows stronger through daily exercise. Curiosity opens the door to discovery. Pattern recognition reveals connections others overlook. Possibility thinking expands what the brain believes it can achieve. Problem-solving transforms challenges into opportunities for growth. Equally important, you explored the mindset required to sustain powerful thinking. The courage to think differently allows innovation to appear. Failure becomes a teacher rather than an obstacle. Calm thinking protects clear judgment under pressure. Lifelong learning keeps the mind flexible and alive. And finally, you discovered that genius is not defined by rare moments of brilliance. It is defined by the daily habits that shape your thinking. Every day your brain is learning. Every day it absorbs patterns from your environment. The question is not whether your mind will change. The question is how it will change. If your days are filled with distraction, shallow information, and passive habits, your thinking will gradually reflect those influences. But if your days include curiosity, reflection, focused learning, and thoughtful exploration, your brain begins building a different structure, a stronger structure. Over time, the results of this training become visible. Your thinking grows clearer, your ideas become more creative, your ability to analyze complex situations improves. You begin noticing opportunities and patterns that once passed unnoticed. These changes rarely appear suddenly. They grow quietly, one habit at a time. The most important step is consistency. A trained mind is built through repeated effort. Reading a few pages each day, asking thoughtful questions, reflecting on experiences, and exploring new ideas gradually reshape the way your brain operates. Think of it as building a mental foundation. Each insight becomes another brick. Each lesson strengthens the structure. Over months and years, that structure becomes strong enough to support deeper thinking and greater creativity. Another important truth is that the journey never truly ends. The most brilliant thinkers in history never reached a point where they believed they had learned everything. Instead, their curiosity continued expanding. Each discovery revealed new questions. Each answer opened new possibilities. This endless exploration is one of the great joys of a trained mind. You begin to see the world not as a fixed set of answers, but as a landscape of ideas waiting to be explored. Problems become puzzles, questions become adventures, learning becomes a lifelong companion, and perhaps most importantly, you realize that your potential was never limited by the circumstances you were born into. It was limited only by how your mind was trained. The good news is that the brain remains adaptable throughout life. No matter your age or background, you can begin strengthening your thinking today. Each book you read, each idea you examine, each challenge you analyze becomes part of that transformation. Your mind becomes sharper with use. The purpose of this audiobook was not simply to provide information. Its purpose was to change the way you approach thinking itself. When you begin applying these principles, you are no longer waiting for inspiration or intelligence to appear. You are actively building it. And as you continue training your brain with curiosity, discipline, focus, and reflection, something powerful happens. You begin thinking more clearly than you did before. You begin seeing possibilities others overlook. You begin approaching challenges with calm reasoning and creative solutions. In other words, you begin thinking like a genius, not because you were born different, but because you chose to train your mind.